And I am really excited to introduce today Dr. Marion Somers, who is the author of Elder Care Made Easier. And one of the reasons that we've got Dr. Marion on today is that her book is in its second edition, and it's got some great updates. And I reached out um, and Dr. Marion was able to join us. So there she is, and from Palo Alto, California. Is that right?
Santa Cruz.
Santa
Santa
Cruz.
Cruz.
Okay. So it's morning there for you. It's lunchtime here for those of us on the East Coast. First off, Dr. Marion, I'm so glad you're able to join us, and I'm really excited to walk through your book and talk about your 10 steps. But before we dive into that, let's get to know you a little bit better. And I know you've got a long career in this field, but give us a little bit of an overview of what got you into this and led to you writing the book Elder Care Made Easier.
Oh, how much time do you have? I could talk my whole time about that. I'm basically a New Yorker who has been transported to California. I've been in California for about 10 years now. Love every minute here. In New York City, I was born in East Harlem, New York City, and was a walk-up building. And the building was full of elderly families. We were the youngest family. We were the only family with children, that is, and everybody else was elderly. And I wound up going grocery shopping and all kinds of odds and ends. But what I found when I was dealing with the elderly, and I had no grandparents, so they became my grandparents. And I loved their stories. They always fed me, which was a big deal. And I absolutely loved hearing their stories, understanding their history. And I found out I was a good listener because everybody said, "Oh, you're really listening to me." So I found out that the elderly, not just everybody, but elderly especially, love listening, having somebody to listen to them. And I went on to, and I felt I wanted to become educated. So I worked, all my education has been at night, and I wound up getting a Ph.D. in gerontology and special populations, which means anybody with a physical, mental, or emotional handicap, which also means I get along with all my relatives.
This is great. Okay, and then one of the things that we talk a lot about in this on our discussions is the value of aging life care managers. I understand you're one of the pioneers in that profession. Um, Tell us a little bit about uh, working as a geriatric care manager, is what we called aging life care managers before they
Well,
changed the title.
I started the program at Brookdale Center on Aging, which is in New York City, which is Brookdale is part of Hunter College. And I started the Geriatric Care Management Certificate Program because my drumbeat was there aren't enough of us out there in the field to take care of this aging population, because I was aware of the demographics of where the aging population was, and we were not going to have enough people to take care of them. So my thought was, let's train more people in this field very specifically. And I wrote the curriculum, got wonderful teachers who were all in geriatric care management field. So I wanted people who had the roots and the experience to be teaching, but I wrote all the curriculum and I had wonderful teachers, and we ran the program for years until I moved to California. I was running the program. So my my understanding is that there just simply are not enough people in this field. The other part of it is anybody who is taking care of an elderly person, whether they are taking care of a relative or a friend, or they're being paid professionally, caregivers are usually overworked and underappreciated. And at the very end of my book on page 163, I want to save time at the end of our program to talk about elder care A through Z. And I took liberties all on one page, every letter of the alphabet, to say, caregivers, if you do not take care of yourself, then the whole thing falls apart. So I used to think it was selfish to put myself first, but it's not. You have to think of yourself so that you have the stamina, the wherewithal, and keep getting information, ask questions, because there's so many experts out there in the field in areas that you may not have expertise in, but you can get some information. There's an abundance of information. The issue is absorb it for what works for you, your family, and the people that you're responsible for. I used to say you're taking care of your loved ones, but when I've done enough lectures and I had people come up to me and say, she's not my lover, or he's not my somebody I love. So I turned it around to somebody you are socially responsible for, because,
Yeah.
because words are everything. And
Yep.
and people need to know, if they've taken on this responsibility, then they have to take care of themselves, but take care of their charge, whoever that person is, with love and respect, and their issues and their needs must come first, but not at your emotional and physical expense.
And you'll probably talk about this, but when I talk to families, I sort of refer to it as you need to determine your line in the sand, because so many families go over that line because they didn't define the line, whether it be the amount of time, the amount of money, the amount of energy that they're devoting to care for somebody. So I'm sure we'll dive into that a little bit deeper. So, Dr. Marion, we talked about this, and one of the best ways for us to have discussions with authors that we've stumbled into here is to just walk through your table of contents. And so hopefully everybody can see this on the screen. I put this together. I got a signed copy of your book. It's wonderful here. And the so what we'll do today is just walk through the table of contents, and then we'll talk about the elder care A to Z. And but the important thing is that you in the audience, we want your questions, your comments, your engagement. So if we're chatting about something and you've got a solution, or there's something relevant, just type it in, and I'll make sure to make sure that Dr. Marion knows that that question is out there. So sound good, Dr. Marion?
Sounds perfect.
So let's talk now. Now, first off, in fact, I when we were chatting about your book, I referred to uh, that I referred to chapters, and you're like, no, 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 Steve, it's not chapters, it's steps. So maybe first off, talk about how you organized your book here.
I broke it into steps because the caregiver is usually so overwhelmed and so lacking in time and energy that I wanted them to be able to go to a particular step that fit their particular need at that moment. Whether it was like step 8, going to housing, they could just open that chapter, get an idea of what's available for them. And each chapter has wonderful resources, but this way they're not spending a lot of time just scattering their energies. What happens? You put a word into the computer, say housing, and you get 300 pages on housing, and then you're overwhelmed even more than you were before you started, because you have such a wealth of information. You don't know how to ferret out what's important to you. So I broke the book down in as simplistic a manner as possible. It is not a medical book. It is a very practical book, easy to follow, with lots of hints and lots of stories, because I have found that when you tell a story about something, they the audience may not listen to every word that you're saying, but they will retain the story or the metaphor or the parable.
I agree. Okay, well, let's start off with step one: communicate openly.
I could spend a whole hour just on communication. First, listen to whoever it is you're in front of, or they're in front of you, and sometimes they're giving you clues and cues. If they turn their head towards you, then they might have a hearing problem without knowing that they have a hearing problem. I always wear the color red when I'm giving a lecture or I'm on camera, because the color red is the last color in the eye spectrum to go. And even if I have another kind of outfit on, I'll wear a red scarf. I have one tucked around here somewhere. I'll have a red scarf. So even the men in the audience, you can put a red tie on, but it will help the person to focus on you. That's all you're trying to do, is have the communication open. It's not just eye contact. Listen to what people are actually saying, and then try to figure out, by asking questions, what are they actually saying? What are they feeling? Where are their concerns? Where are their fears? And when you ferret out all of this, communication starts opening. I will very often repeat something not quite back the way they said it. Do you mean this? And they'll say, no, 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 that's not what I meant. And then I'll say, do you mean that? And then we ferret down and we get down to the nugget of what they are trying to say or where their concerns are.
I love it. And I love that you brought up visual and auditory the clients and the individuals that we're serving, if they've got low vision, if they've got hearing impairment, is identifying that, because one thing we've discovered on these discussions is there's a lot of stigma involved, even though you can't see hearing aids anymore, in getting hearing aids, and a lot of people with hearing impairment are really good at faking listening. And so having that conversation can make a big difference. Okay, now I really like step two, put safety first, especially for those folks that are really focused on aging in place in their own home.
Most accidents happen in the bathroom. So the first thing I do is put bars everywhere, near the toilet, on the side of the bathtub, along the handle of the bathtub. Getting in and out of the bathtub is you cannot be cautious enough. If there are steps, sometimes I've gone into apartments where there's just like a one step down, a lower level. I'll put a railing there as well. I am big on putting railing and banisters wherever possible, without ruining the decor of the living area, but to make sure that all is in place so that safety is number one. Lighting, having sufficient lighting all over the place. If somebody, you talked about somebody driving the car, my father, the worst conversation I ever had was taking the keys away from my father. And he was down in Florida, I was here in New York, or in New York at that time. And we did it step by step. So having conversation that might be touching on your seniors' sense of, who am I if they take my car away? Who am I if I can't do walking? Always, always take the emotional need of the individual that you're dealing with. You're going into their home or they are coming into your home. Put them first, but not putting yourself to the point of anything detrimental to yourself.
Um, I like in your chapter on safety, you reference pets, and pets are such an important part of our life, especially if you're aging in place and, all by yourself. A pet can really help, but from a safety perspective, there can be some challenges there, right?
Oh, I didn't know you were going to do that, but I have my pet. Very often seniors
Oh,
are allergic. I didn't know we were going to do this, but he is my buddy. When I was working for Hasbro, they wanted to go from being a toy manufacturer for children, they wanted to go into the senior market. So we devised this toy. He's got red on him so that a senior could watch it. And he has all the benefits of pet therapy without tripping over him. You don't have to feed him. You don't have to take him for a walk. He's not going to poop in the house.
no litter box. Yeah, I bought the same one for my mom, and she loves them. And it what's bizarre is that and there's some like there's some very expensive robotic versions of that product, but but what's interesting is to see how you can have an emotional attachment. It can remind you of a pet or an animal, and it really is pretty interesting. But yeah, so that's the thing is that especially for those caregivers that mom and dad have a pet, is recognizing the value of pets, but also being very careful in terms of the safety aspects.
The safety aspects when you have a pet is very important. Very often when you have a pet in the house, a live pet, um, and somebody comes into the house, you have to make sure that the pet is put in another room, even if they're very friendly, because they're usually older dogs or older cats, and they get frightened more often, or they'll bark, or they might even bite, even though that's not their basic behavior. So you have to make sure that the pet is always appropriate in the house. And if people come into the house, very often they need to go into another room, into the bathroom with their kitty litter and what have you, just so that somebody who comes into the house who might be allergic to them does not suffer.
Great. Okay. Step three, improve the lifestyle.
This can go in whatever the need is. You go into somebody's home, especially somebody that you really don't know very well, and you look at all the different things that they can possibly use that will help them, whether it's a walker. Now, if you're going to get a walker, get one with a seat, because this gives them the independence, but it also encourages them to walk, because this way, if they get tired if they're on a walk, they can just put the little seat on the walker down, and then they can just rest and then continue walking when they feel appropriate. Just figure out what it is they need. Sometimes it's improve their lifestyle, getting them to go out and have more recreation. If they are able to go out and recreate, that's fine, but sometimes they're not. And sometimes it's something as simple as making sure they have sunlight. When I've hired aides and and they've got somebody who is now housebound, the person could not go outside. I said, make sure they go near the window. And I said, just think of them as a piece of toast if you have to, that you give them 15 minutes of sunshine on this side and 15 minutes of sunshine on that side. They're getting the vitamins D that they need. That this sounds like such a small aid, but it makes a difference if people are looking at the outside or in some way engaged in the outside. And I always find out, what kind of recreation did they have? What were they involved with? Well, they may not be able to go fishing, or they may not be able to go to race car or horseback riding, or whatever it was they used to do. But I would bring in to the home pictures, stories, videos, whatever that would stimulate their conversation and stimulate their imagination. And then you sit down with them and say, what about this? Tell me about your horseback riding days, or tell me about your skiing days. And you just open a whole wonderful world for them, and their long term memory kicks in. And before you know it, they are having a conversation. And
Yeah,
I'll
I really like in this chapter you've got this inventory list of just about every possible hobby, interest, volunteer type organization. And I know we're going to talk about housing on in step eight, but I'm always encouraging people to have this list of things that you're interested in, things you were interested in, and things that you want to be interested in, because that can help you make connections to live a more purposeful life. But it's also very important. You talked about bringing in caregivers. Is that it's important for a caregiver that comes in that they have some of these topics for their clients so that they can develop a relationship, because it's probably hard when you're looking at a client with a wheelchair or walker to think that that person was an expert skier 40 years ago. But once you start talking about skiing, all of a sudden you realize he is truly that was something that he was very passionate is very passionate about.
I try to open the doors to their former life so that we can bring their former life and their memories and their very positive memories to the fore. And that gives them a whole roster of things to talk about. Otherwise, they're only going to be talking about their medication and their aches and pains. And that, for the most part, will turn even the most loving caregiver off if they can't generate any sense of rapport. So, knowing what somebody's lifestyle is makes a difference in opening the lines of communication. Even if you've never skied in your life, you can relate to them going downhill, being cold, and all of the travel that might have been involved in the skiing.
Yep. All right. Step 4, make life easier with adapted equipment.
We are blessed to be in an area and in a time when adapted equipment is in abundance. If somebody has Parkinson's, say, for example, there are utensils that are specially geared and balanced so that the person can maintain their independence and hold on to a spoon, and their hand may be shaking, but the balance mechanism there will keep the spoon level so that they can eat their soup or eat their oatmeal on their own. And that adds to their dignity. Anything that I can possibly bring into the home that will help them with their dignity, as far as I'm concerned, that's the major part of my job, is retaining, making them safe where they are, but to make them feel appreciated for the person that they have always been. Because you may just see an old person before you, and they may have a lot of serious problems, but when you can connect with who they were, that makes them come more alive internally, externally, and in the caregiver's eyes. Then they become have more dimension as a person.
I love it. Okay. Now, this is one where I know we could talk for over an hour because it's something that we talk about a lot on these discussions is manage financial issues.
Well, first, everybody should be financially dealing with their own issues at home so that they understand. But when you take on the responsibility of another person, you are legally and morally responsible. And you have to be very careful if you can get, I always had real financial advisors working with my clients. I did not take on their responsibility financially, but I also made sure that all the papers were in order, all the receipts were in order, everything that was paid for by the aid, we got receipts for, and we kept an absolute log of everything that was spent, because sometimes the issues don't come out at the beginning, but when the person passes on and there's a reconciliation of all their financial issues, and all the papers and taxes have to be done. If your papers are not in order, it can be a financial mess for the caregiver or somebody who has been taking on this responsibility. I do have a very short story. I had one client and we were taking care of everything, we thought. And when he passed on, a bill came in for a storage unit that was not in all the papers that we had. I found the key to the storage unit. I went with the financial advisor to the storage unit. There were two magnificent old cars from 1930. One was 1930, one was 1940, in magnificent shape. I had been working with this man for 4 years. None of these receipts ever showed up because he had a separate drawer and he paid for those storage lockers on his own. Don't know why, but we had to then figure out where this fit in his financial whatever, and it became it was all legally okay because we found the key and everything went into his assets, but we never understood why he did that. So you're going to find our elderly sometimes don't want to reveal all of their secrets, all of their personal stuff. Even if they're paying you to take care of it, they want to hold a little bit back. So just be aware that you're dealing with financial issues, and that can always have the potential of being a negative issue if it's not handled appropriately and legally.
And Dr. Summers, I just glanced into chat and let's see, Renata says Dr. Summers is right on target. Most of the caregivers are so busy they talk way too fast to the older adults they're serving. They also get frustrated when the older adult repeats the question. I've seen this throughout tours in our in the community that she works with. Really good point about speak. I tend to speak fast, as you all can hear. The but Rich Carlson says Dr. Summers mentioned something about a device that can be used with spoons, forks, etc. Please provide any details on this. My aunt could really use this because her hands shake. And I just did a quick internet search on adaptive utensils. And can you see that on my screen?
Yes, yes,
Okay. These are some of the utensils you were similar to the utensils you were talking about, correct, Dr. Marion?
yes. But I have also found if you need adapted equipment, call up the national organization of whatever it is the issue that you're dealing with. I was speaking about somebody with Parkinson's, and usually the national organization will have specifics to help people who have that particular problem. So I always go to the national organization when possible. I try the locals, local units, but they very often don't have the breadth of experience and background. But the national organizations of whether it's cancer or whatever, you'll find the national organizations who want to help you.
Yeah, and Anne Marie says that for those that are in Maryland or Baltimore County, Maryland Access Point in Baltimore County can also assist with adaptive equipment. And I believe many states and counties do now have adaptive equipment programs. But Rich, hopefully, I love that advice because the national associations, they're being hit up by all of these innovative providers that are creating these wonderful adaptive equipment, and they can usually refer you. Oh boy, we got Joy Laverty on the call today, and she says therightstuff.com is another great resource. Great. I dropped those resources into chat there. Okay, so let's see. Okay. Step 6: take care of legal matters.
And everybody or one should have their will, their healthcare proxy, their durable power of attorney. All of these papers, no matter how old you are or how young you are, to have these in order. But I also suggest to people, what are the funeral arrangements that you want? What do you want at your end of life issues? How you want this to all be in place so that you're not leaving a mess for family members to take care of. You don't you want to leave with a great big bow on all of your issues, and somebody else, all they have to do is undo the bow and everything is laid out for them, because it's a blessing if you have taken care of everything, not just for yourself, but for those that you leave for later on. And most people do not want to talk about dying, death, and bereavement. In fact, the step 10 is called Learn to Let Go, because my publisher said nobody's going to read it, Marion, if you just make it dying, death, and bereavement. So it's not a subject people are comfortable with. I have personally been in front of maybe 300 people who have passed on. And it's a beautiful experience, especially if everybody is at peace. I know we're going off the legal matter, but when people are at peace at the end of their life, everything falls into place and it's a smooth transition. And part of that is having all of your legal papers put in place. You can get a lot of this information straight from the computer, but it is good to make sure whatever you have put together, have it checked over by a lawyer, because a comma in the wrong place or a name misspelled can make the difference between the papers being able to be executed upon your death or not executed, and families start to fight, and you don't want to leave a negative behind after you have passed on.
Yeah, very, very well said. And again, like a lot of times people they don't want to talk about this, they don't want to think about this, but then when they do contact an attorney, they may be like, "Oh, this is too expensive," or what have you. And we've had a lot of elder law attorneys on these discussions. They all say they will work with you if you've got concerns about the budget. And then in many jurisdictions, there's legal counsel for the elderly, where you can get uh, pro bono and sliding scale advice, because none of us want to leave our affairs in a mess for the future generation. Okay, step 7: find mobility in disability.
It's no matter what your disability is, whatever the limitation is, there is an adapted piece of equipment out there somewhere that will meet your need and make your life infinitely better. I wrote a whole bunch of things. I believe in charts. So in my book, there are all kinds of charts that will help you deal with whatever it is you have or the person that you're caring for has. We should not be in anything other than our most comfortable state, no matter what disability or challenge we are facing.
Yep, I agree. And one of the things that I've found, because I've got friends close to me that have been either permanently or temporarily disabled. Part of it is those loved ones and those people around us is helping them reinvent themselves, like helping them understand that, okay, yes, you can't play tennis anymore, and that was really where your passion was, but there's so many other things in the world that you can do, and I'm here to help you discover those things. It's very difficult when you lose an ability, but we've got so many resources now for people with disabilities. Okay, step 8: find the right housing. This is always a hot topic.
You need to know what you think their needs are. You also need to express what you're exploring in the way of housing and find out what the individual thinks they need, because what they think they need and what you know they need can be miles apart. So it's a matter of going through what are the options, what are the finances, how do we deal with this? And no matter what facility you go to, check them out. There are all kinds of organizations that do background checks, or if there were complaints against them or lawsuits against a particular organization. All of that is public knowledge. If you're going to a facility, the first thing you do, the main floor, go into the bathroom on the main floor. If there is an odor there, then you know there are some serious problems. Go to any of the tours that any of these facilities might have. Go on a tour, but then I suggest go on a tour that of your own. Just say, I was in the neighborhood and I would like to see what you have. I'm thinking about X, Y, and Z for my aunt, uncle, or whoever. And they are usually very accommodating, even if you just dropped in, and they will walk you through. Find out what is the ratio. If you're going to a facility, what's the ratio of the help that they have to the amount of clients that they have? The staff ratio is very important because that will indicate what is the level of care you can give, or the facility can give. All of these facilities want to be doing the very best for their individuals. Do they have recreation? Do they have trips out? Do they take them shopping? No matter what level of care, you still want to treat them as an individual and what are their specific needs, not just taking care of their physical needs, but taking care of their emotional needs. And I will say that through any lecture that I'm dealing with. You are dealing with an individual. No matter what you see before you, no matter how infirm they may seem to be, always treat them with the dignity that they deserve.
Great. Okay, and then let's see. Step 9: hire help when it's needed.
Well, I have lots of lists and kind of questions to ask, but I always ask, I go through my list of all the things that I want to know. What are the needs for this individual? Do they need full-time help, part-time help? If there's a male, would he like to have a male aide or whatever? Figure out what the individual thinks they need, then work out what is doable within their financial ability. And then when I'm interviewing somebody, I have a list of questions that I ask, and there are certain things that you cannot ask legally, but you're giving the key. If you're hiring somebody, you're going to be giving the key to somebody. I can't stress that enough, because they may take that key home, and you don't know who is home. Are there legal issues at home? Are there kids that have just been out of jail? You don't know what the home situation is, but when you just ask very conversationally kind of questions, because I always go out with a list that's there and in front of me, and they can see I'm reading from a list, and then I'll go off my list and kind of casually work into the conversation. Oh, and I'll find out how many children they have, what grades they are. Then I know, do I have an aide that's going to be out because there's a very sickly child, or do I have an aide that has a long history? Check up on their references. Don't just ask for references. Check up on the references, because sometimes they have a relative write the reference and it sounds very good, and that could be a support for them. But you also need to verify that whoever you have brought into the house, that they are the person that they say they are. And I also check on their background. I check their police record.
Great. Okay, and then step 10, learn to let go. I think you referenced this earlier.
Well, this is probably the hardest chapter, but it is, to me, it's the most beautiful chapter. I have been at the bedside so many times when somebody is making the transition from this world to the next, and I have found it a very beautiful transition, especially those who have let go of all their woulda, coulda, shouldas. I liken it to going through the pearly gates. Now, if you go through the pearly gates and it's a very narrow gate, and you got big suitcase full of anger and another big suitcase full of whatever your negativity is, you can't go through those pearly gates. I have found that people who have really let go of their issues have made the transition really very beautifully. And also during the transition, when they go from this life to whatever comes next, their sense of who they are comes to the fore. And there's an electricity that actually comes into the room, where the hair on your arm can people have said it's like a feather going over your arm. I'll tell you a couple of stories. I had a Greek family who were just absolutely beautiful. There were 8 kids in the family, and we were all around daddy's bed, and we were at the hospital, and the doctor kept saying, I don't know why this man has not passed on, because we don't know what's keeping him here. And so I said to the son, your father has been the head of the household all of these years. I think he needs to know that the mantle has now been passed on to you. Tell your father that you will take care of the family, and you will take care of all the women in the family, and do whatever else your father might be expecting of you. So the son said it to his father. Nothing happened. So, so I said to the son, I said, tell your father in Greek the same thing. So he went through a long explanation of all the things he was going to do to take care of the family members, and that his father should be in peace. With that, the father blinked his eyes a couple of times. And I asked the family to just everybody hold hands. So we were all standing around the bed holding hands. And one daughter was holding on to the father's hand, and the son was holding on to the father's hand. And with that, the father died. And the doctor, or the nurse rather, had been in the room watching all of this. And she said, I have never seen anything like this. She says, I wish everybody transitioned like that. But it can be that peaceful.
Yeah.
I don't know
No.
where we are story time, but I want to say one more thing about that issue.
Sure.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. When my Aunt Rosie was in the hospital with a coma, now she was in the hospital for 3 weeks. Nobody could figure out why she went into the coma, what brought it on. The doctors checked everything. This is another story. This is a very personal story. So and I always, when I'm visiting somebody at the hospital, I always say, hi, I would say, this is your niece, Marion. There's a coffee shop downstairs and they have flowers. So I was talking to her as though she could hear me, because in my head, she could hear me. So I said, they have red roses downstairs and yellow roses, and this room needs a little perking up. So I'm going to go down and get myself a cup of coffee, and I'm going to buy flowers. Which would you like? I was hoping that she would squeeze my hand or something. There was no recognition. So I went down, got my coffee, brought it up, and I brought red flowers. So I let Rosie smell the coffee, because I'm always looking to stimulate the senses. So I said, Rose, and I put my finger in the coffee cup and I put it on her mouth, and I went like this with it, and so that she could taste it, smell it. No reaction whatsoever. So I put the flowers in the vase and I chatted with her a while. And then when I left, I said, goodbye, Aunt Rosie. I had been visiting her every day. So in 3 weeks, almost 4.5 weeks later, she comes out of the coma. Nobody knew why she went in. Nobody figured out why she came out. She came out. So I get a call from the doctor. I go to the hospital, and I'm wheeling my aunt out of the hospital. And she's in a wheelchair only because she had been in a prone condition all this time, and they were just going to have her physical therapy at home. And she turns to me as we're going out the door, and she says, up to this point, she hadn't really said anything to me, chit-chatty, but nothing. So she turns to me and says, Marion, you brought the wrong color flowers. They should have been yellow. And you bought red. And she didn't say thank you or nothing like that. As a caregiver, sometimes I like to be thanked, but nothing. But it just reinforced with me that when people are in a hospital bed and you think they cannot hear you and they're not responding, that does not mean they're not getting information. So when doctors start talking about whatever the patient is, and they start talking about, I shoo the doctors out of the room. I said, we'll take that conversation out of the room, because I don't want the patient to hear gloom and doom, no matter what.
Mm-hmm. No, great stories there. Okay, so we got through all the 10 steps, and I have to say, I mean, we really have covered the full spectrum. These are all topics that you know, I'm, I've had conversations on every single one of those steps um, with members of our community. You've also got some resources in your book and some appendixes, but you wanted me to also share with the audience this elder care A to Z list that you've created.
I created it because my experience has been very often the caregivers are working so hard, so diligent, and they don't take care of themselves appropriately. They're all of their energy is going out, and it's like a well. If you keep drawing from the well and you don't replenish the well, you're going to run dry. And as a caregiver, it's paramount to take care of yourself. And I used to think this was selfish to put myself first, but I have found over the long run, if you don't take care of yourself, nobody else will, number one. And number two, if you are responsible for all of these people, or even one individual or a child, sometimes we're talking about a disabled child, which takes up a lot of time and energy, and all of the energy is going out, you have to take care of yourself. So I made one sheet, which is on page 163 of my book, and I'm just going to read it. I know you have it up on your screen. So it's A through Z, and I'm just going to go read it, address every issue at hand. It's very important. Don't let things accumulate because you'll be overwhelmed. Be bold and accept the reality of the situation. This is not a time to make believe things are going to get better. If you know they're not going to get better, then do the very best you can and prepare. Prepare yourself. Organize everything and categorize everything that has to be dealt with. I'm a big believer in lists. My book is full of lists. Checkoffs. I believe they make life, for me, certainly easier. Delegate where possible. And this is very important, especially for our caregivers, because they take on a lot of responsibility. Ask somebody, do you have time to, sit with them in front of the television while they watch such and such program so I can do whatever I need to do? And if somebody doesn't have time or energy, then they may be able to part with a couple of dollars and say, here's a couple of dollars. I can use this to take her to a movie, or we can have a meal sent in, something special. So ask. The worst that can happen is somebody says no. That was a big lesson for me to learn to ask. And also, very often the people who are at a distance or just around the corner, but they are not involved with whatever the issue is, the family members, they very often are the people that have the strongest opinion on what you should do for this individual, but they're not lifting a moment of their time or parting with their energy or giving any financial support to what's going on. Steve, you have to tell me if I'm running. I don't know where
No,
we
no,
are.
you're doing great. I was just typing in a message. Somebody was asking, somebody said, how can we get a copy of these resources? I'm really loving this webinar. And I was just dropping into chat for everybody that we will have this recording and the PowerPoint here up later today. But then I'm also dropping in the link on Amazon to order the book.
Okay, so I can continue.
Continue, yes.
All right, the financial matters should be in order for yourself as well as the person that you're caring for. Don't procrastinate. You always have an excuse. You always have a legitimate excuse for not doing what you don't want to do. Just do it. Just do it, like the slogan says, just do it. Just do it. Help is available if you search and ask. Independence of your elder must be considered at all times. Even the smallest act of showing that they can do something on their own, whether it's, putting a shirt on or tying a shoe or dealing with their knitting and crocheting, it doesn't make any difference. As long as they can do something for themselves, brush their own teeth, these are very small acts of kindness. You are allowing them their dignity. J, juxtapose your thoughts. And what would you do if you were in that situation? How would you feel? Sometimes thinking about the issues from their standpoint makes you have a little more empathy. I know you don't have time, and sometimes you've run out of patience. Empathy still has to be part of your equation. K, keep a journal of everything, especially if you have somebody coming into the house. I had the aides always put down who is coming, when they came, and what have you. And this way I could always backtrack if I needed to. If somebody called, I could backtrack. Who was it that called? Why did they call? And what was their contact information, so I could get back to them rather than have to front through a whole bunch of papers trying to figure out who called. Legal issues, we already covered that. Your legal issues, as well as the person you're taking care of, need to be in order. M, make time for your own family, your job, and your social life. It's going to your book club, or you're going to an exercise or something that reinforces you, replenishes you. And if you let all of your friendships go, you're going to feel depleted and you won't have the energy. When you take care of yourself, your energy is always buoyed up. It's always there for you. And know the desired goals. We've already covered a lot. Organize your thoughts and plan ways to address each challenge. And if you cannot address the challenge, get a professional, get a friend who knows somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody, and get an answer. You're not expected to know all the answers. P, prioritize your own issues and time constraints. Just be realistic about your time. We all have 24 hours. How are you going to use your 24 hours? How are you going to waste your 24 hours? That's up to you. The quality of life, both yours and your elders, must be addressed. I'm saying the same thing over and over again, but it cannot be repeated often enough. You've got to take care of yourself. And our recreation, my my master's is in recreation therapy. I like playing. As a kid, I had no time to play because I was taking care of three younger sisters as I was growing up. So recreation is very important to me. So I'm letting everybody know if anything happens to me and I get very, very old and cranky, do something so I can go fishing. That's my thing. As search for resources, they're out there. We are living at a time when the resources are such abundance. Focus in on specifically what you need, get that particular need dealt with, then go on to the next need. T, trust the elder you're caring for, and they know themselves better than anybody. You understand that being a caregiver requires patience. That should be in bold. Visit your elder in person, on the phone, send cards, but just keep the lines of communication open. W, write out information and keep it current. X, I couldn't figure a word for X, so I took some poetic license and put exhaustion may set in. So find ways to relieve stress. Y, you're doing a great job. Congratulate yourself because you are doing. Nobody else may congratulate you, so do it for yourself. Zone out and reward yourself for a job well done. So I applaud everybody who's out there listening to this, because you're only listening to this because you've got some sort of caregiving issue or you're working in the profession, and we need to support each other. And this is my effort to support you.
Well, that was great. And Dr. Marion, the thing that I like about this talk today is that it was very comprehensive, which speaks to the comprehensive nature of your book. Going through those 10 steps and doing the A to Z, there's really no stone unturned. It's very much it, it great solutions for every possible topic, and I think that is what challenges so much many of us when we're thrown into a caregiving role. Is it's the unexpected. But I think if you follow Dr. Marion's framework here, there's still going to be a lot of unexpected things, but you're going to be more prepared for it. So I think that was very good. And let's see, I want to go back to Joy. Just had one question on the background checks. And actually this is for you, Dr. Marion, but also for some of the audience members, is that um, talk about what resources you use for background checks.
You're able to find that you go to an organization within your community and find out how you go about the background checks, because if you're in one area and they are from another area, the information is, even in this day of electronics, all the information is not necessarily carried over. I had a very bad experience with a house that I owned at one time, and I rented it out, and I checked on because he was in New York, and I checked on New York, and everything checked out fine. What I did not know to check was he lived in Florida, and he had a terrible record in Florida, and he wrecked the house. But I had done everything on the surface. I had done absolutely everything right. So that was a very expensive lesson for me. So go to your police and say, there's somebody I need to check on. How do I go about it? And this way, you're doing it according to the rules and regulations of that particular community or that particular state, and then start out from there. Because most of the questions I get are from all over, not only the United States but Canada and England. So I try to have people go local first and then broaden. Except when you're dealing with a national with an issue of cancer or leukemia or whatever, go to the national organization because they usually have very specific information.
Yeah, great. And then also, I know in the audience we've got folks talk to providers that are out there, everybody is willing to share their resources. And, if you're hiring an in home caregiver uh, privately, um, talk to your county office on aging because they have programs in place. But if you're out there, and let's say that you're doing background checks for an organization, talk to your colleagues and your trade associations because they have some tools that could be helpful in that regard. And then,
Or your union.
yeah, exactly. And then the thing I think that's always important to remember is just because somebody passes a background check, d- these these people that are uh, the con men and women of the world, they're notorious for getting around loopholes. It's just important to, especially at the beginning of a relationship, to really monitor the activity and and keep tabs on things because fraud against our seniors is something that is unfortunately it's really out there. So, man, I'm wiped out. We've covered so much here, Dr. Marion, and it's the top of the hour. We landed the plane perfectly here. I want to thank you so
You're a
much for
good pilot. That's what you are.
yeah, I want to thank you so much for being here. I can't wait to have you back on again, and we could dive deeper into any of these elements. But just as a reminder, this is recorded. I'll have the recording up later this afternoon. I'll have this PowerPoint that I was using, the contact information for Dr. Marion and where you can get her book, and we'll look forward to seeing you all next week on some of our discussions that we have planned.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.